Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky. And we're going to spill all the tea.
Yeah.
Tell everyone about how this whole thing happened.
Uh-huh.
And all the crazy behind-the-scenes stories that we have collected over the many years of doing this
I feel
crazy
like it's been,
thing.
what, 30 years? No, it's not that
No,
long. But
not quite.
It's been quite the time so far. In the very best possible way.
We've known each other for... How many years? Over 20.
20 years?
20 plus
20, yeah, something
years.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. With positive and really great experiences to share, and a lot of really fascinating stories.
And even more coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the most exciting thing.
They never stop.
So the first thing we have to do on this podcast is explain our origin story.
Well, do you want to share who you are first?
I do.
Just in case anyone's curious. Okay.
So I'm Miranda. I founded this theater company back in 2015. Our first show was 2016. And at the time, it was me, my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and a few friends that just started this whole thing. So that's how it started. Now we're here. We've got years of shows under our belt that I feel like we have a lot of inside jokes and stories that could be shared with the world and they could enjoy as well. So that's how the whole thing kind of happened.
Yeah, and here we are today, years later.
Later.
All because of that one decision, that big decision.
And introduce yourself.
Oh, of course, yeah. So I'm Joel. Like you said, we've been friends for a very, very long time, like 20-something years. Big theater fan, big community theater supporter, art supporter, fan of seeing shows, all that good stuff. But I've been with the company since 2017. I think was Heather's. Heather's was my first show, and been going all the way since then. And directed a couple things, and just telling stories and creating great art and a really great environment. And I love this company, and it's a great time. So. Super happy to be here and to be having these discussions. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah, I know we've wanted to do this, like, sit down and talk about this for a while. Mm-hmm. And something I mentioned to you is I wish I'd kept a journal for every show that I did.
Gosh, yes.
So this is kind of like our journal entries of every show.
Keeping all the stories alive and keeping them all recorded and
exactly
in our memory. So, yeah. I guess the first question I really do want to ask, since we have known each other for a really long time, what was your first experience in theater? And when did, like, the bug bite?
So I was thinking about this for a while because it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment. Mm-hmm. But I really think it was Disney, honestly. Mm-hmm. So when I was little, my parents got me a Disneyland VHS sing-along tape that I would just watch on repeat. And then they ended up taking me and my brother to Disney. Mm-hmm. And you know this because you've worked there, and I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But Disney is a big show.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's backstage, there's onstage. They call all their employees cast members. And when I went there and kind of experienced that environment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. So then my brother and I started putting on shows at home, and we would put on like costumes and reenact different movies. We also set up a makeshift Disney park in the house, and we had a rope drop and everything. Our parents would show up as guests, and we had like a little rope, and they would always like run through before the park opened, and we would have to stop them. But we even had an airplane set up. My favorite setup from this was our makeshift Splash Mountain ride.
Oh,
so
okay.
We had little plushies from the ride, and we would set them up on the railing by our stairs, and my parents would sit at the top of the stairs, and we would push them down for the big drop. Oh, we also reenacted Fantasmic, so we did.
Oh, yeah.
We did a lot of this, and then slowly I started getting introduced to Into the Woods. Little Shop of Horrors was a big one. My neighbor and I would put on productions of Little Shop of Horrors in the kind of like court area by our townhouse. And I saw Little Shop at our former high school when they did it, which is well before we were there. And I remember seeing Suddenly Seymour. And so up to that point, I was kind of like, yeah, these are actors, whatever. But when I saw that and they actually kissed, I was like, what? They totally immersed me in this world. So that's kind of how it all started. But how about you? How did you get into this?
Yeah, it was kind of a hard thing to think back on over all these years of just different shows and seeing shows and all that good stuff. But, for me, my first experience, I feel like, was related to watching movie musicals. My grandmother was a big fan of movie musicals, and my entire family was just really interested in theater, and I think that kind of got everything started. Also, I was in church a lot as a kid, and we would do plays and shows and things at church that I just had gotten started with that kind of focus in mind and giving that a try. And then I think my first real experience, and you mentioned that we had done theater in high school together, and we had seen a lot of shows, gone to the same high school, but I remember my brother, who's several years older than me, doing shows at the high school. And what was really great about our high school theater program was that for many years they allowed elementary, middle school students to be in the shows. And I remember my first show that I did with them, I was in the 4th grade, and we did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I'll never forget my brother telling me that they were doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I was like, I'm so excited, but I'm so nervous about this audition. And this was like, hey, if you show up and you read and sing a few bars, you'll be fine. But
exactly.
I have this clear recollection in my mind of saying to my brother that, I'm very nervous about this audition, and I don't know how I could live with, that kind of rejection of not getting cast as, an Oompa Loompa in the 4th grade production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But that's my first early real recollection of acting and being in a theater space and what felt like a real theater was performing in those shows. And I mean, we did those shows for years, but I also remember, and I hope you remember these experiences as well, but we went to daycare together.
Yes.
And it was always a big deal that, whatever show they were doing at the high school, we always tried to put on a smaller miniature production of those shows. So, some of my earlier memories are also our non-legal, non-rights production of Little Shop of Horrors, which, for elementary school age kids was not really appropriate material per se. It was definitely a choice, yeah. But we put on our own special production of Little Shop of Horrors, and the following year, of course, we had to keep up with what the high school was doing. So we had our own production of Cats that we also got to develop and create and put on in our own little stage and space. And that was always something that was just super exciting for us to do, to just kind of show our own skills. And I mean, we created costumes, we had a little set, we invited people to come and see it.
I know. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So whose idea was that, and how did we get people to actually come see this?
I'd have to think back on that a little bit more, but I don't remember whose idea it was or how we made it happen. I mean, it was probably something that I just was like, this is what everyone else is doing, and this is what I want to do, and I want to be a part of that. So, it's kind of like that conversation of creating your own opportunity. I saw that we had the space there, and I'm like, I'm in the 3rd, 4th grade. Let's go ahead and let's just put on a show.
Right.
And I remember being in school and, telling everybody at school that this show was happening and that everyone needed to come to see it. And I think that was kind of the big draw for that, was just come out and see our small scale production of Cats again. Right. Not very legal production, but
Well, I don't think we charged for tickets.
We didn't. That's true. That's true. But we definitely told a story. I don't know how close it was to the real story, but we had a lot of the same characters. And
oh yeah, I had the iconic Memory song.
Oh yes, yeah. There's definitely a photo of us somewhere. From that production.
We'll share it on the Instagram.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, I don't remember, exactly whose idea it was, but I can almost guarantee that it was something that I just thought about and said, we can make that happen. If the high school can do it, we can do it.
And we did.
We did.
Honestly,
absolutely
we did.
We made it happen. And it's just, those are some of those earliest memories that I have. And all of that, and also seeing live theater for the first time, I think also really was a big moment for me. I remember,
what was your first show?
My first professional show, I remember going to see, very timely, Wicked. It was in the 4th grade, and it was coming to DC, and I was so excited to just be able to go and be in a big theater and actually see a show for the first time. And I don't remember much from it, but I've seen it many times since then, and it still kind of holds a special place in my heart. It's that first show that kind of like lit the flame. So
I love that. Mine was Phantom.
Okay.
On Broadway. Mm-hmm. And I remember early on, because they're like putting on the show, and the guy was struggling to get onto the elephant prop, and I like turned to my parents. I was like, is that supposed to happen? Which of course it is, but yeah, that was one of my first experiences with professional theater. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to start out.
It is a great way to start
out. It's intense.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Do you remember how old you were?
Oh, man. In the Heights was on Broadway at the same time.
Okay. So it was like 2008, 2007, somewhere around there.
Yeah, because my parents thought about taking us to In the Heights, but we ended up starting with Phantom, which in hindsight I think was the right choice for starting out. Mm-hmm. In the Heights is more of a unique musical, and Phantom's more of a classic. But yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah. I always think back to, my early experiences with theater, and, I feel like with theater, sometimes you experience things a lot sooner than other people might. People seem to, it's easier to experience live theater and discuss topics that are a little bit more mature when you see them in theater. And I always find that interesting. I mean, from my experience, I remember watching, Rent as a younger kid, probably a few years earlier than I was supposed to. But your experience with Phantom of the Opera, that just makes me think of seeing In the Heights or seeing Phantom of the Opera, and what that experience must have been like to discuss or, see those themes or those topics or stories presented on stage. Must have been a really powerful experience.
Yeah. I remember with Rent, I discovered the song Seasons of Love on YouTube. Yeah. I was obsessed with it. And my mom had the full cast recording on her iPod. Mm-hmm. So I asked her if I could listen to that song. She was like, yeah, but only listen to that song. So it's really young. Of course, I listened to the entire thing and fell in love and all the things. Mm-hmm. But going off of that, too, with our production of Little Shop, I remember I had a CD player, and I would listen to the movie soundtrack. Oh, yeah. Like, on repeat. Mm-hmm. And my parents were like, you can listen to it, but you have to skip the Big Green Mother song. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. So I always had to skip that one, but it was just funny that they trusted me to just skip it so I wouldn't get in trouble, but could still listen to my Little Shop of Horrors at daycare.
Yeah, I mean, those productions were just wild, and it's just wild to think back that, we were just very... we were so interested in theater at the time that we would go to that, level to try and recreate that same experience that, was happening down the street, and just give that opportunity to other people to try and tell the story. And again, word for word wasn't accurate. I feel like it was mostly,
I don't even think we had the script.
We did not have the script. I'm pretty sure we just had been watching the movie, or, we were just kind of piecing things together as we went along. But it's a great early memory of doing theater and telling stories. Yeah. So, yeah. And then I guess, beyond that, I know I had mentioned, I had done, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at the high school. And I think that's kind of how my, real love and passion for theater kind of got started. But I had done a couple of shows there, and I know we had done some at the same time. Yeah. But I just remember, I think what was your first show? Do you remember?
So I did Joseph.
Okay. Yeah.
With the high school. Mm-hmm. That was a blast. And I also did Annie.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember they built wooden bunk beds for all the orphans, but they didn't sand them or cover the edges at all. Sure. And I was in the middle bunk, so I would have to hoist myself up to the middle bunk, and I had bruises all down my legs from hoisting myself up there. But it was a lot of fun. And the director at the high school at the time had directed my dad in high school. So that was like a really special moment. And I know he was super excited to have a Sakula in the show. And I'm sure that was a weird full circle moment for him as well.
Yeah, those were always really great opportunities for elementary, middle school kids to just learn what theater was about, and 100%. Gave them an early opportunity to kind of see what the process looked like, the rehearsal process, and what it meant to put on a show, and being in the same space, and telling stories, and making sure that you have your props, and it gives you a lot of responsibility and a lot of it's a good learning opportunity at such a young age. Those were always like really great experiences.
Remember the high school girls teaching me how to put on stage makeup, because I didn't know, and they would hold the mascara up to my eye and they'd be like, okay, blink, 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 and I would just like be rapidly blinking trying to get the mascara on.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many like learning opportunities through that process that I just feel like so many people were able to receive by doing those shows, and starting out so young by just being an Oompa Loompa, or being an elf. I think it was an elf for a show early on, A Midsummer Night's Dream, I think it was.
Nice.
Yes, yeah. And I remember Annie, and I remember Joseph. I walked across the stage in Joseph. I felt that was a big moment. Yeah, I'll never forget being an Ishmaelite in Joseph, and I had a fake beard that I had to wear when I was walking across the stage. And I remember preparing to walk across the stage, and I got halfway across the stage and I heard the audience laughing, and I was like, I'm not doing anything funny right now. I don't know what's going on. And I looked down, and around my neck was the beard, and I forgot to put it up over my face. That will go down as one of those experiences in theater that I will always, always remember. But it's, again, one of those learning opportunities that just you can't ever pass up.
But also, who didn't check the middle schoolers' costume before they walked across the stage?
It's one of those responsibility things. You claim to be mature enough to check your own beard, but sometimes you just forget. So.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so I mean, over those early years, there were a lot of really iconic roles, and it was actually the first time I got to say a line on stage too. It was for Annie, and just nab that mutt back there in the alley, get in there. Those words just kind of just sit with you for the rest of forever.
Did we have a real dog for Annie?
We did not. No. No, we did. Sandy was a real dog, but I remember I had a stuffed animal that I had to carry across the stage. It was my first acting partner was that stuffed animal.
Was the stuffed animal?
Yeah. No, it just
didn't give you much to work with.
Did not. No. But yeah, it was just it was one of those experiences that I feel like really just encouraged me to want to keep doing it more.
Yeah.
And just kind of rode on that high all the way until I got to high school myself and really started to put on shows. Yeah. But do you remember anything else from your experiences with those like early years?
That was the main thing. I mean, I also remember they kept us all in the drama room and just escorted us like right before our cue, and we would run on, and they took us right off, which is really the best way to do it. The fact that they had that many middle schoolers in a show and pulled it off, incredibly impressive.
There were like 100 kids in Annie.
Yes.
Like
there
over
were
100
so
kids.
many. And in the ticket sales, I mean, it was genius.
Yes.
It really was.
Yes.
And the way that director grew that program, brilliant. Honestly, brilliant. He got people from the middle school, and they just worked their way up to the high school, and it was perfect. But
really started up a good opportunity to build money and build a program and
100%.
Create that energy. Yeah. So, I mean, I know I'm a year older than you, so I kind of got started with that high school theater experience. I got a little bit of a head start on it from that standpoint, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like at least I tell people a lot. People go, how did you do this? You were like a kid when you started this, essentially. And I always refer back to our high school experience. Like, that's how we got the skills to do this. Right, wrong, pretty ugly. We'll talk about that. But it, one way or another, definitely contributed to our success.
For sure. I know personally that I learned a lot through my experiences in high school. I feel like I have been able to process them a lot over the years and really like come to terms with understanding of like how things went and where we are now. And I feel like without a lot of those experiences, I wouldn't know how to handle a lot of the things that we see on a regular basis with our shows and what we're working on.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first question as we pivot to our high school experience, which I think we're ready to do.
For sure.
The first question I have for you is, so obviously you came into the high school right when the director shifted. Mm-hmm. And the show choice was very questionable that year. Mm. So I'm wondering, what were your initial thoughts on, this person? Well, first of all, if you could remember what the shows were before the hands changed, and then transitioning to these really obscure shows, like, what did you think of that? Were you gung-ho about it? Or were you like, this is weird and I don't know if I like it?
So I think it was interesting coming from the experiences that we had in the previous years into that program and, the way that program had been built up. I want to say my 8th grade year, so right before I started high school, we did what shows did we do? We did The Pajama Game was the musical that year, and I want to say Pied Piper was the play. So very big, very elaborate productions. And I think what was so interesting moving from that into my freshman year was, even though I had all that experience and like understanding of what the program looked like and what the classes looked like and, how, who the people were that I'd be working with in the program, I think by the time I got to freshman year, it felt like it was a little bit of a different experience from a learning opportunity. It went from being like hey, you are this kid who does shows with us, you are the student here. And, you have to kind of adapt and understand and kind of watch from the sidelines a little bit to understand where you actually fit in. It's a common kind of experience for a lot of people when they go into high school. You're not quite sure where you belong, but, the drama program and the people that were in it felt like home. They felt like that was kind of where you belong, like where I belonged and who I would gravitate towards. And that was definitely the case. Having having the program change hands between the 2 years, I know for the people who had been there and actively receiving support from the previous teacher and, having that relationship with him was a big adjustment for them.
Yeah.
I think the shows, it definitely was a change in the type of shows that we were doing. I think what we did that year, the first play that we did was Alice in Wonderland, which for me was really exciting. I remember my character was Humpty Dumpty.
Oh, nice.
And I still remember the costume that I had, which was like a little puppet that had legs that would like kick over. And I thought that was the greatest thing. And I had some really fun and exciting lines and got to interact with Alice for like a solid 5 minutes in the middle of the show. And
Amazing.
It felt like a really like rewarding experience. I can understand for those who were older than me, kind of that shock or that adjustment a little bit. I think they were anticipating, closing out their program or their time in high school with, these big, a big grandiose production, because that's kind of what they had adapted to and that was kind of what they were used to. I think for them, having that experience and seeing what they could do and then having to adjust to doing something that was on a slightly smaller scale or a different skill or a different experience for them was definitely a big adjustment. And I remember kind of that energy being around. And then, spring we did Schoolhouse Rock Live, which was a really interesting experience. I hadn't even realized that was a musical to begin with. And I think seeing that was what we were doing and not really knowing what that experience was going to entail was really interesting to me. I can say definitively, and we can get into this more later down the road, but like, I'm not a dancer. I don't move. Well, I can move. I don't dance. And I remember running back and forth throughout that entire show, singing those iconic songs. And it just was like a workout. And it was quite the experience to just be like, okay, I'm going to run over here and sing Conjunction Junction, or I'm going to go over here and sing the Heart songs.
How was the crowd for that? Was it big?
From what I remember, it wasn't huge. I think the people that were seeing the shows were very receptive to the idea of what it was because they knew what they were walking into.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people outside of, kind of the realm of the theater mindset or those traditional theater shows that you'd expect to see were probably a little bit confused by it.
Yeah.
But I know for me, it was one of those types of shows that, you go into it and you're might be confused by it being a musical, but once you start hearing those songs, you're like, okay, I can get on board with, no pun intended, I can get on board with this and, really, really enjoy this type of show and this experience. Yeah. So it was definitely an adjustment going from those previous shows to that new season and that new perspective. But it came at a time where I was ready to adapt and try and figure out who I was. And I think for other people it may have been a harder adjustment, but we learned and I gained some great experiences from that and made a lot of great friends that year. And, it was quite the season of shows.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.